Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek, and I'm back. It's been a little while, hasn't it? It has. I hope you're all doing well. I apologize for falling off the face of the earth for a few weeks. If you are in the Discord or my on my Twitter, you probably have been seeing what all I've been up to, which is mostly medical stuff. Turns out I don't know if I talked about this last time. I don't think I did in the last video I made, but I've been feeling bad a lot lately, and I finally went and got it checked out, and it turns out that I had a stomach ulcer, or have a stomach ulcer. So I have been starting treatment for that, and it is well underway. But I will say the med that I take to treat my stomach ulcer is definitely a bit of a doozy. It it takes some getting used to. However, I thought, what better way to come back than to catch up with, I think, the only major piece of Total War news that I have not covered. I have done a kind of a live reaction to the gameplay footage they put out with Miao Ying. I did that when I was live on Twitch. And I will be porting that over here to YouTube so that anybody that doesn't want to have to go dig that up can still watch it without having to deal with the pain in the ass. But I thought a good thing to do for today would be to go over all of the Ogre Kingdoms mechanics, because this was actually released when I was in Scotland, and I just haven't had time to get around to it. So let's get to it now. Only a little over 2 months later. But anyway. So, we're going to just kind of check out these articles that talk about the Ogre Kingdom mechanics and what my thoughts are on them. Of course, we'll also be looking at pretty much every article they've released, which is that they have a Greases article, a Scag article, and then a kind of a finale article on the Ogres, which will probably be the last piece of news you'll see before I imagine media copies will start going out. As far as the Ogres are concerned, because we still have a 9th Legendary Lord to show off, and we are officially, as of today, 1 month away from release, which is just wild to think about, isn't it? 1 month, and we are all of us will have Total War Warhammer 3 in our hands, and we will be failing all of our personal responsibilities and making terrible life decisions so that we can just play this hopefully amazing game. But anyway, let's get into the Ogre race. So, first thing is camps. Something really cool they're doing is that camps are essentially, they talk a bit about it, but basically what you do is that for the Ogres, all settlements are minor settlements. There is no such thing as a major settlement for the Ogres, which they talk about right here. Ogre camps can be set up a sufficient distance from settlements, and they act as the major settlements, which are the camps. Captured or colonized settlements are minors, so they will only have the 4 building slots, one of which is, of course, the settlement itself, and rank up to max 3. So a ton of the structures that you require in order to get like a lot of your best units and everything, you have to use a camp to get there. Pretty much literally the only building tree that only goes up to rank 3 and you're capped is looks like it's the melee. Yeah, the melee tree with your ogre bulls with different weapons, and iron guts. So it's going to be critical to be getting as many of these camps as you can, because they're what are going to allow you to get to rank 5 settlements. So as far as how making camps go, it's locked in your tech tree. So the very first tech that you're going to get in your tech tree is going to give you your first camp. And then your camp basically functions as a horde that cannot move. So you throw down a camp in a settlement, or a region rather, and it's there for the rest of the game. And if you want to get anything from that camp, you either need to use obviously global recruitment, or you need to move your way over there. However, it does do some really cool things. The first is that you could deploy this anywhere in the world. Any territory, any distance from your other lands. So you don't have to put it in your territory. You could put it in the enemy territory. Hell, you could send a tyrant literally all the way across the world. Like, you could start in Cathay and send a tyrant all the way to the Empire and set up a camp in Altdorf, and that works. If you're in enemy territory, the garrison is also active, because these they have garrisons just like cities, and you'll be able to build buildings to upgrade your garrisons, and you're gonna want, you know, super powerful garrisons for these camps, because they're going to be very, very important to you. But the important thing about them is that they will raid based on the garrison that's protecting it. So the larger the garrison is, the more income you're going to get from raiding. So that's super awesome, and I love this really interesting take on a horde, where they're, you know, they're not a horde. There's, well, let's be honest, there's not going to be a horde anymore in Total War Warhammer 3. With Warriors of Chaos already confirmed to be taking settlements, and like presumably making Chaos Fortresses, and then Norsca will probably receive some updates as well. The true horde, quote unquote, is dead. It no longer exists, which, you know, honestly, good riddance. But these camps are going to be really, really nice, because you kind of have to decide how you want to treat them. You could set them up in your territory so that they are easier to protect, and that, you know, they're going to be more interacting with as you're setting up territory. Or you could go somewhere super far away, maybe go to a province, or a region rather, that you know has a ton of income, like Altdorf, or presumably some of the major cities in Cathay, or maybe some of like Kislev, or some of the Dwarven realms. And you could just drop a camp there, and as long as you can keep it alive and active, it's going to be providing you with a ton of additional income, which is just fantastic. Not to mention that it is also an army that, you know, the enemy has to lay siege to it, so it should be fairly difficult to destroy. And it also makes a really nice area for your units, especially if you decide to travel somewhere far away in the world. It can make a really good base camp, or you can, you know, you can recruit armies from it and station them around it so that they have a bunch of allies helping protect them until they're big enough to set off on their own and begin their journey of carnage and slaughter. But I really, really like the camp system. We also know that they exert spheres of influence. For the sphere of influence, they're basically a land version, kind of like a Black Ark, from what I understand, where the Black Arks have like that giant sphere of influence, right? Where the Black Ark can affect armies that are within range with various buffs. You can use army abilities from like the Black Ark, like unleashing bombardments, and you can recruit units and stuff like that. The camps are the exact same thing, except for what they do is they're on land and they can't move. So Black Arks are limited to only being in the ocean, but they can move around as they wish, and kind of become their own self-sustaining forces that can attack all over the world as long as there are ports. Whereas in this case, they're stationary. However, they are your only access to major settlements, and I'm going to presume they have a couple of other major buffs as well. So some things that they tell us that they can do right off the bat is they can, of course, give you additional replenishment, and they can generate extra meat, which is always important, especially if you're going to be playing ogres. So the big thing that you have to decide is, how do you want to use them? Because once you place a camp, it can't move, and it's there until you or the AI destroys it. However, where you place it can be critical. You could put it in the middle of an enemy region so that you could steal a lot of money from them, and it can also, and you could just use that as a money-making scheme. You could set it off in an empire that you intend to invade so that it has the ability to start recruiting armies and unleashing them to capture all those nearby settlements, so you can basically just set up a new empire. You could also set it up in your territory right next to a base so that they're reinforcing one another if they get attacked, making it like a super base. Or hell, you could even set it up in like a narrow pass, or somewhere where its its little area that the AI can't walk through without attacking it blocks the entire pass. Which, seeing as it seems most of the ogres start in the mountains of the world, that could actually be super valuable. You could basically just block an entry route into your empire, and the AIs, if they're at war with you, cannot get through it unless they destroy the camp, or they're able to underway stance like Skaven, dwarves, or teleport like Zinch does. So that has a lot of really awesome implications, and I think could be really fun for like multiplayer stuff too. Like being able to mess with a human opponent by literally blocking a route into your empire, or maybe a road out of their empire, could be a lot of fun. They do talk about that for other factions, Ogre Camps allow you to recruit Ogre mercenaries. So if there's an Ogre Camp near you and you go into its region of influence, as long as you're not at war with them, you can recruit Ogre Bulls as mercenaries. You no longer have to, it doesn't seem like there's going to be just an icon that shows up anymore that's like, click here and you can recruit ogres. I'm assuming that'll be gone once they combine the whole game, and instead it'll just be that you actually go out and find these Ogre Camps to recruit units. Of course, we have seen that seems to be an expanded system as far as like alliances go, and that mercenaries are probably about to become a very big aspect of the game and be everywhere. So obviously you're not going to need the dilemma system that we have in Total War Warhammer 2, where like that system will no longer be necessary. In any event, they also talk about that there are a bunch of different buildings for camps. While many of them are units, as we see here, looks like about half of them are units. Another 2 seem to be kind of garrison related, but there's just a ton of non-unit buildings, and the one they actually show us here on this thing shows that you can reduce the upkeep in camp and make it where all characters like in the area get a lot more money. You see, this is how you get butchers, fire bellies, and all sorts of really awesome, important aspects to your empire. But as far as what all it can do, the main things they tell us is you can get gold per turn, so it could be a big money thing. You can reduce the upkeep for all units that are there. You can get global bonuses, profitable ventures, a bunch of stuff like that. But it seems like getting as many camps as possible and putting them in really strategic places is truly going to be the core of the Ogre campaign. And then we have contracts. So this basically allows you, the player, to be a mercenary, which I think is a really cool way to give ogres that flair, while also still having you, identifiably be the Ogre Kingdoms. So the biggest thing with ogres is that as you're the ogre player, you will receive contracts from other factions around you, and every 10 turns you will be given new contracts. So these contracts will be given by a faction, and they'll say, hey, we need you to do something for us, and if you accomplish it, you get a bunch of diplomacy buffs with that faction as you prove yourself to be a reliable ally and mercenary, and you get some money. So for instance, we see that the Darkland orcs here are trying to hire you to kill someone. The Western Provinces, which is Zhao Ming, is trying to hire the ogres to capture and occupy a settlement, so take it away from an enemy. And then, of course, there is another one here, which is eliminate a character. So it's just a really good way to just earn money and also be really buddy-buddy with factions around you. The only thing is that you cannot be at war with them. Obviously, if you're at war with someone, they're not going to be hiring you to try to make you do work for them. But it's a good way to, figure out who you want to punch and team up with. Because if you start getting a lot of contracts from a faction, you can really take advantage of that to not only make them really like you, but also use it as an excuse to make money, even more money, while beating the tar out of someone that's in your way. And then the next big thing we're going to talk about is meat. So we see here that ogres, their whole society, everything about them runs on meat. I mean, hell, the concept of gold to ogres, and gold being a very important thing, is really only as old as Greasus himself is. Greasus is such a big, important character because he's the guy that taught ogres that gold is valuable. But for thousands of years, and to this day, meat remains the most important thing to them. So you have two separate upkeeps with your armies. You have meat upkeep and gold upkeep. For every unit you have in an army, they consume some meat. And so this isn't like the Skaven, where the Skaven have food as like a campaign-wide meter, right? That you have to manage, and like your settlements are eating your food, your armies are eating food, etc. This is not like that. The meat is unique to the army. So every ogre army has its own supply of meat that you have to maintain and deal with. So if as it's increasing or decreasing, it'll be available on the army's banner, and you get passive effects depending on various things. The only exception is that you will not be consuming meat if you're within range of a friendly ogre camp. So basically, you want to have meat nearby where a lot of your armies are, because the primary easy way to generate a lot of meat is to hang out around an ogre camp until presumably you reach like your max capacity as much as you can carry, and then you can start exploring and checking out the world. However, you can always top off a little bit or try and maintain your meat level by defeating enemy armies or smashing enemy settlements, I presume. But the best way to get it sounds like, is going to be through being near a camp. So meat is not simply an upkeep, but you can actually use it for a lot of things. So first, you have pre-battle feasts. Whenever you're about to go into a battle, kind of like how Skaven have the system of like you can spend food before a battle in order to like get more Skaven summons. Well, for the ogres, you can use meat to give you a stacking bonus to your speed, charge bonus, and unit mass, which is terrifying because all three of those, of course, deeply compound on charges and make your charges more and more devastating. Especially when you consider that the faction-wide buff for ogres or ability is that they have a passive called Ogre Charge or Gut Charge, where you cannot fully negate an ogre's charge bonus. You can cut it down a little bit, but even if a unit has like expert charge defense and is fully braced, they still cannot completely get rid of an ogre's charge bonus. They can only reduce it. So the bigger bonus you have, that's just a flat out positive. So, that's something you could use meat for. In addition, you can make offerings to the Great Maw. So this is a menu you can open up for each individual army. And looks like there's 4 options. You can give your army melee attack, campaign movement range, reduce global recruitment time, or get additional winds of magic. So some really, really solid options. These buffs look like they last for 10 turns, which is great, but only one can be active at a time. So as long as you have enough meat, you can always have one of these going, but only one can be going at a time. So, you need to get across the campaign map really fast. You come and get it. Your army took a lot of damage and you're somewhere kind of hostile, so you need to recruit a bunch of units globally to fill your bellies to get -2 global recruitment time, which is crazy good. You're running a lot of butchers, or maybe you're running with Scrag. You could do Give Me Gut Magic, and then of course Bloody and Raw is always good. And then the next thing they show us are big names, which I actually really like the big name system. So because ogres cannot read or write, at least in the vast majority of cases, they are very big on storytellers and braggers. So they, of course, have the big name system, which is that ogres like to have titles. So while Cetra may have the greatest number of titles for himself personally, the ogres have many, many, many different kinds of names that can be applied to your characters. So every ogre lord in the game has 4 big names you can get, and they require different things to unlock. So for instance, you could see here that to get Rat Killer on this random ogre lord they show us, you have to win a battle against the Skaven. To get Death Cheater, you have to lose a battle and survive. To get Noblar Kicker, you have to win a battle with Noblars, and you can see they have some really powerful effects. Noblar Kicker makes all Noblar units unbreakable, which is hilarious. If you've got Rat Killer, you get a bunch of bonus melee attack against Skaven. And we don't know how he unlocked it, but we've got Big Bellower here, which gives you bonus to your leadership range. So just really cool ways to customize your character and make them really unique. Of course, they do note that the Ogre Legendary Lords, such as Greasus and Scrag, also have big names. But the Legendary Lords have they have a guaranteed number of, or guaranteed selection to pick from, Whereas all of your regular lords, your tyrants and slaughtermasters, will have a randomly generated big name, which is really cool. Or a randomly generated set of big names. So you're going to be able to have a really awesome amount of customization when coming to your ogre characters. Once you unlock a big name, you can equip it as your primary title, and it gives you the effect. You can change titles, but there is a short cooldown, and you can only have one title active at a time. So, for instance, this guy has Big Bellower active right now, and it looks like it's got a cooldown of 7 turns before he could switch to another big name. But if he were to switch to Rat Killer, Big Bellower would no longer be active. Oh, this is on the Hunter. Okay, so it looks like the heroes, at least some of the heroes, also have big names, because this is a Hunter character. So the heroes have it too. And one that he shows us is that his tyrant got Arse Belcher, which he doesn't tell us how to get it, so I'm curious how you unlock that one. But it gives you the ability Arse Belcher, which is a leadership debuff. You get Camp Maker, which gives you which you unlock by if you deploy a camp with that character, and gives +1 control. Boom Maker is win a battle with Lead Belchers, and it's 20% missile strength for certain ranged units. Or Ken Eater is lose a battle but kill more enemies than your opponent, which makes this character unbreakable so long as he's over half health, which is kind of crazy. So just some really interesting things that add a lot of good flavor. And then, of course, we have the tech tree, which they show off, and you can see that the tech tree basically you have a camp, then some techs, then another camp, then some techs, and presumably another camp, and then some techs, and another camp, etc. So the big thing is that the more camps you set up, the better your faction is going to be, and the way you get through camps is by going horizontally as fast as you can through the tech tree. But obviously, if you're doing that, you may be missing out on some really good techs. If I had to guess, I would imagine that the techs that are further out are probably the best ones, or the ones that are like further in this case, because you kind of have to like sideline from your camp making. So like, do you want to just rush camps as fast as you can to really expand your empire and get a lot of those essentially major settlements, or do you wander around a little bit to pick up some really powerful buffs and then get some camps? Some stuff to think about. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. They also do note that several of the camp improving techs will also unlock your army abilities, which I think we see some of in some of these, but we know the ogres have a number of army abilities. I think I covered that article before I left. I think we talked about the ogres in battle and how they build up their army ability meter by chasing down fleeing or broken enemy troops, and it allows them to use various buffs, but it looks like you have to unlock those army abilities. You don't just start with all of them available. All right, so moving on to the next article, we've got Greasus. So we're going to skip, a lot of the lore stuff. We've talked a lot about Greasus, but let's kind of check out what he does as far as in-game. So basically, the big thing they tell us is that Greasus has access to some really powerful big names, some of which are unique, notably of which that he has very, very solid bonuses to raiding and sacking, which I really am looking forward to getting to see him stretch, all of his muscles and everything. Let's see. They talk a little bit about how he's portrayed. I'm just looking for any actual in-game information. Let's see. For ogres in game, try and get the materials game as faithfully as we can, unless there's extreme mitigating factors. But for the army book and quotes from the White Dwarf battle report and so on, we have stuff on how ogres speak. Yeah, that's fair. And then of course they talk about the Ogre Cart. I've spoken about this, I think, a fair bit. I don't know if I've spoken about it on video. No, I'm pretty sure I have actually. But I like the chariot thing, the cart. As much as it would have been great to see the Noblar swarm carrying Greasus around, I really think that they did a really good job of finding a way to keep him faithful to the premise of that he's too wealthy to walk, and has Noblars, carting him around while still making it not a horrifying experience on people's gaming rigs. and you know, making their animators try to, you know, lose their minds. Where, you know, would it have been cool to see him like carried by an entire carpet of Noblars? Sure, but I kind of think it's one of those things where, like, to have him 100% true to faith tabletop portrayal, like, the thing about Greasus is not only is he carried by a carpet of Noblars, but they're constantly dumping out gold in front of him because he refuses in tabletop to be, like, carried across anything that's not gold. Because he's just that wealthy. So there are also Noblars behind him that are constantly picking up the gold so that it can then be like brought back in front of him and dumped out. And there's also a lot of notes that Greasus is so heavy that the Noblars carrying him around are constantly dying. So there's like always Noblars dying and falling, you know, getting like trampled or whatever, and then new Noblars basically rush in to take their place. Like, it's just a completely, like, it's such an amazing mental image, and it's easy to represent in a tabletop model, but it's impossible pretty much to represent in a video game, especially a strategy video game where, like, there has to be so many possible things for every single model to do and run around and stuff. And so, like, I think they struck a good balance with it. I think the cart looks awesome. Like, it looks like it was built by Noblars, which it would be. Ogres very rarely, if ever, construct things. They much prefer to let the Noblars do the building because Noblars are tinkerers, but it still like has like gems encrusted into it and like gold plating, and like it looks opulent and ridiculous. And to me, it really looks like an ogre trying to emulate something he saw a dwarf do once. Like, I genuinely feel like this is Greasus's interpretation of seeing, like, Thorgrim Grudgebearer's throne and being like, I want that! And basically, this is, like, the closest thing the Noblars could make. And I think it works very, very well. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree with that, but that's just my 2 cents. Then on to Scrag. Scrag's interesting. I haven't really got to talk a ton about him. But Scag has actually undergone a pretty heavy redesign compared to pretty much every other legendary lord that we're dealing with as part of the series. The big thing about him is that I don't remember if they talk about it in this, but yeah, they do talk about a bit of that. They kind of took Gollum as a pretty heavy inspiration, as well as Rorschach for some reason. But the big thing is that he's completely batshit crazy, and they made him even more disgusting than he looked on tabletop. He looks very unsettling. Like, the way his fat sits on him, and the fact that, like, his gums are literally sticking out of his mouth. Like, I don't know what happened to Scrag, and I don't know what would cause this, if this could even be done to a human, because it looks horrifying. But basically, whatever happened to Scrag, something has caused his lips to literally peel back all the way off his gums. So you could see the entirety of his gums, and his teeth are just kind of like sitting in there like rocks. And it is profoundly uncomfortable looking, and unsettling, which is great. Like, Scrag should be unsettling. He should be terrifying and disgusting, and a true... Like, because that's what a Prophet of the Great Maw should be. Just a completely unhinged, barbaric, man-eating monstrosity. And I think they nailed it with Scrag. And then here we finally get the, like, playable faction bus with the 2 characters, where we see with Greasus, the big thing for Greasus Goldtooth is that he looks like a deranged, terrifying, fat Santa Claus. Just turned up to 11. He also has terrifying looking eyes, because one of his eyes is like super messed up. But I love his crown. I love just how ridiculously fancy his clothing is. And yet he wears so little. This is what I look like between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because this is the Thanksgiving gut with some of the, like, Christmas apparel. But for his faction effects, he gets plus 20 diplomacy with all the Ogre Kingdoms, plus 25 additional income from trade, and plus 25% mass for all units faction-wide, which is crazy strong, because mass plays a critical and massive role in determining how effective your charges are. The more mass you have, the more devastating your charges. It also means that you are much less likely to get knocked or slapped around by other large things. So your ogres all being fatter, great, perfect. Income from trade, great. In fact, Greases pretty much gets more income from every possible source of income, with the only exception of his of like buildings that just make income passively. But he gets more income from trade, he gets more income from raiding, and he gets more income from sacking and looting. Not to mention, he makes Iron Guts half price, which is incredibly awesome, because I suspect Iron Guts are going to be a devastatingly powerful unit. Especially because they're probably going to be one of the most heavily armored units next to only like your cavalry. But everything looks really, really good. Greases looks like a ton of fun, and if you're a greedy person, which I am a deeply, uncomfortably greedy person, then I am drooling at all of these financial buffs. Because you have to remember, you can also stack that with buffs from your personal skill tree and your tech tree, which is just, oh, it's so good. Then they show us his skill tree. The skill trees in this game are kind of interesting. They look, I don't know what it is about their design that like throws me off a little bit. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just that like they're not smaller than Game 2's. They're genuinely not, but they look smaller. And I think it's because they compressed it a bit and left all this like negative space here at the bottom. Because I feel like it used to be that your yellow tree would be at the top, your red tree would be in the dead center-ish, and then the blue tree would be along the bottom. And now they've kind of picked it and moved it higher up, the blue tree. And I think that's what throws me off, is all this negative space at the bottom. My brain wants them to put something there. I don't know why, it just makes me uncomfortable. That's just a really random tangent, but whatever. Of course, he has like a bunch of additional skills compared to other tyrants, and then he of course has his unique skill tree, which they just go ahead and tell us what they do. You have Tribe Stealer, which gives significant buffs to Ogre King relations, and then melee attack and weapon strength buffs to fighting other Ogre Kingdoms, which is great. Because with Greases, let's be honest, you're inevitably going to be kicking the shit out of some tribes while, lovingly petting the heads of others who prove useful to you. But I really think that that's great for Greases. I mean, Greases, one of the biggest things he did to earn that Tribe Stealer title was that Greases killed a ton of different ogre tribes who, like, smarted off to him. Tribe Stealer is kind of a terrifying name, in particular for him, because it just goes to show kind of how spooky he is to ogres, that anytime someone refused to follow him, he would literally just take their tribe from them. Either by showing up and killing them, well, he would kill them, but he just did in different ways. Whether that was the time he caused an avalanche to kill a tribe that was too powerful for him to fight outright, or the time that he showed up to a tribe that had an ogre much bigger and stronger than he was, so he kind of cheated to kill him, where they were supposed to both crawl down into the fighting pit and duke it out in a duel. But Greases waited until the other ogre climbed down into the arena, and then Greases jumped from the top of the arena without climbing down and basically belly flopped on the bigger ogre, which just all of that sudden force unexpectedly literally just snapped his neck and killed him. Which Greases then ate all of him. And it caused a huge hubbub in the ogre community because they weren't sure how to handle it. Because technically, like, he broke the rule, he broke the faith of the rules, but he also technically didn't break the rules. Because the rules of a duel in ogre society is that you're both supposed to fight in the fighting pit, and whoever wins by killing the other one is supposed to eat them. And if you cannot kill and entirely consume your opponent, then basically someone else will challenge you until someone comes out on top. But it was a huge problem for a lot of people, or the ogres, because some of the ogres argued that Greases cheated because he jumped from the top and, landed on him when he wasn't ready. Whereas some of the other ogres will said, well, technically he killed him in the arena, and technically, like they were both in there when the death and the violence happened. So, and then, but of course, Greases said, if you're if you think I cheated, then come down here and fight me. And then a couple of bruisers went down there and fought him, and he killed them all fairly and ate them too. Honestly, Greasus' superpower is that he can eat many times his own body weight, which is terrifying. Greasus is basically the Kirby of Warhammer Fantasy. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. Then we've got the Gold Tooth buff, which gives you a big buff to leadership and armor for Greasus' army. Always welcome, especially since ogres are probably not going to have a lot of armor. Drake Crush gives him a substantial bonus versus large, which is going to be excellent, especially for smashing greater demons or, you know, fighting other ogres. And then Over Tyrant, which we actually can see the specifics of here. Gives you 5% additional casualty replenishment, +1 recruit rank, and +1 local recruitment, which when you stack it with all the other buffs you can get, I think is a very, very solid skill to have. The more casualty replenishment, the better. You can never have too much casualty replenishment, in my opinion. And +1 recruit rank is also always really good, especially because it's to everything, not just specific units. And then, of course, they do talk about that he has big names that you can get as well. And then he has a special skill line up here at the top that all upgrades your camps, which camps are the only major settlements you can get, and we've talked about how important camps are. Which Greasus actually has a skill that gives you an additional camp, which is insanely impressive. Like that is the best skill you could possibly get on an ogre. Because normally the only way to get more camps is through your tech tree, but Greasus gives you an additional one through his the last skill in that line, which is called the best camping. And then they also note that Greasus has unique access to more raiding posts, which gives more places to refuel his army and more meat. Finally, they talk about a start position, which is that Greasus starts at the Great Hall of Greasus along the Ivory Road, so he starts where he is known for being. It's very, very close to the center of the map, which the Ogre Kingdoms, especially with the way the map curves, he's like, to my understanding of looking at the map, the Ogre Kingdoms is just a little bit right to basically the dead center of the map. Because it basically forms just this giant wall of mountains between the Darklands and Cathay, with only North and West Cathay currently being on the map. You start a war with a bunch of ogres. There's also some Skaven nearby, etc., etc. I honestly, this seems like he's going to be a great campaign. There's a lot of different factions all around him, which means you're going to have an exciting time fighting. You got dwarfs, greenskins, Skaven, you can go to Cathay, there's lots of ogres around you, you could go north where all the demons are, and there's going to be like Warriors of Chaos and Norskins, or you could always go to Kislev and the Empire in the west. So just a ton of great stuff. And then he starts actually with probably one of the most humble starting armies, which is that he has two of the most basic bitch version of ogres, ogre bulls, a single unit of saber tusks, and a unit of noblars. It's very, very basic, but honestly, the thing is that you can recruit a lot of stuff probably very fast, just build up a lot of ogres, and of course, Greasus is actually probably one of the most terrifying starter characters, next to, honestly, I think only, like, the Greater Demons. And then we have Scag. So Scag, his faction effects are, you have Disciples of the Great Maw, which all characters, not just armies, but all characters get plus 10% campaign movement range. That's fantastic, especially for a race that rewards you for kind of wandering around. And then plus recruitment rank and plus capacity for butchers. And that's faction wide. So you don't have to be in a local province with Scag to get level 3 butchers right off the bat, which is fantastic. Definitely seems like you're going to be wandering a lot. With Scag. He's going to really want you to do that. Honestly, the only thing I have to say with Scag is pretty much the only beef I have, so to speak, with the Ogre roster, which is that I don't understand why we did not get all versions of the Slaughtermaster and Butcher. We only got the Lore of Beasts or the Lore of the Great Maw, which I find really disappointing, because they're supposed to have access to the Lore of Death and the Lore of Heavens as well. I'm hoping we will get those sooner rather than later, but they absolutely need to add those in the game. If there's one thing CA has a really big habit of doing, and I wish they would really stop doing it, it's basically like preventing factions from getting all of the races, or all of the winds of magic that they should have. Literally the only faction that has a decent number of lores of magic that has every single one is the High Elves. Technically the Empire, but only because the Gelt has the Lore of Metal. But there should absolutely be a Hero Metal Wizard, and we're still waiting on our Wizard Lords. We're still missing a ton of Slawn. We're missing quite a few Dark Elf lores. We're missing a ton of Wood Elf lores. And we're missing Ogre lores. Like, come on, guys. Y'all really, like, it's not that hard. The only thing I can think of is that I guess maybe they reached a point where they were like, okay, here's the hard cutoff date. And hopefully they're making, like, unique appearances and assets for the Slaughtermasters and Butchers, depending on what lore they wield. That's the only excuse I could think of, is that if they're decently different enough looking, that you could justify, oh, well, we didn't have enough time to make the Death and Heavens one, like, to a quality we like, and they'll come later. But I kind of doubt that's the case. Anyway, and then for Scrag's legendary lore effects, Scrag actually is kind of a pigeonholed legendary lore, which I think is fine, because it makes him very, very spooky. But it's basically that he just gives replenishment rate and upkeep reduction for Gorgers. So they're telling you, get Gorgers. So, if you're not running a lot of Gorgers with Scrag, then why are you playing Scrag, you know? They do actually show us his big names, which is kind of cool. So we've got the Maw That Walks, which is defeat an enemy spellcaster, which gives you more magic, and you get significantly more meat from camps. You can get Gore Harvester, which generates 2 meat every turn, which is really, really good. Especially, I imagine this is probably just like win a battle. Or something easy that you can get right at the beginning. I think that's actually a really solid one just to help with your army maintain its meat level as it wanders. Ever Famished makes it where the meat you get from battles and camps is significantly higher. That's really good, but you have to end a turn with 50 meat, which I'm assuming that I'm wondering if 50 meat or like just above 50 is the cap, but that's a lot of meat. And then World Swallower, which is win 5 battles, plus 20 diplomacy with all factions, and plus 8 campaign movement range, which on top of the 10% he already starts with, on top of the 10% you can get from the very first skill in your blue tree, assuming he has that. That means that with Scrag, you could almost immediately have 28% additional campaign movement range. And that's not including any you might be able to get from one of the hero characters, like the Hunter or the Butcher, or any other like further skills or like ancillaries. So that's fantastic. That's fast. It's very fast. Then of course they talk about that he has some unique abilities. So the unique abilities for Scrag is he's got the Maw That Feasts, which makes it so the offers to the Great Maw, which we talked about back here, are cheaper, which is great. So instead of like, I think 8 meat, they'll probably cost like 5 or 4 or something. Gorger Onslaught, which lets you summon Gorgers, which is great. Whirling Stump Blades, which improves your melee attack and weapon strength. And then Driven by Visions, which gives you more campaign movement. Oh my god, that's terrifying. Scrag is going to be like the Sonic the Hedgehog of campaign movement. And then they talk about that he is pretty much the furthest away character of any, and he starts in the Southern Grey Mountains, which is I think he is the most southwestern character in the entire game. If I'm understanding the map correctly, the Grey Mountains are barely on the map. So he is like literally, I mean, he's between like the Empire and Bretonia, essentially. So it's going to be really interesting when they do a combined map. If they keep Scrag around the Grey Mountains, that would be weird, but I would love it, because it would finally give Skarsnik a friend. Skarsnik would finally have somebody who he could have like a really strong diplomacy buff to being like cool buds with. Like go Team Destruction, go Team Orc and Ogre. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you do. But of course, you've got lots of really fun factions to mess with. You got the humans with the Empire and stuff around you. You've got Kislev and the Chaos Waste to the north. You've got Skaven all over the place. There are Wood Elves and Laralorn. You've got Norskins and Kislevites and Warriors of Chaos and Demons and Dwarfs if you go east. And then the Darklands. So lots of really, really good stuff. And then Scrag's starting army is very similar to Greasus, but it's a little stronger, I would say. As far as like the overall army, because of course Scrag is a wizard and he starts with a unit of Gorgers instead of a unit of Saber Tusks, which the Gorgers are Vanguard, Vanguard deployment, high speed, and unbreakable. And I assume that they either have stock or you can upgrade them to get stock. So they're going to be pretty terrifying. But that's going to be it for this video. That's pretty much all of the Ogre Kingdoms information. I will say that if it was up to me personally, I would probably, my first campaign, do Greasus. I don't know. It's always hard to say. However, we're going to do a bit of an event. I've been talking about it on Twitch, but there will basically be a live event where we'll have a bit of a stupid, fun little thing to determine who I'm going to play first. I'm going to let the community decide. And there will be some kind of like, there's a whole, I talk about it a lot on Twitch. Which, speaking of which, just before I go, I do want to say that if you're a fan of what I do, you love talking about Warhammer Fantasy, or you like just listening to me talk or whatever nonsense, please do consider joining us over at twitch.tv/Loremaster Sotek. You don't even have to like make an account or anything. You just hang out as a lurker if you want. But if you do like join the conversations, I answer lore questions on a very regular basis. We talk a lot about Warhammer lore. I often like read passages from the books or show off art in the midst of us playing lots of different video games. We've of course been talking a lot about Total War Warhammer 3 and my thoughts and predictions. So if any of that sounds really interesting to you, then please consider joining us. Right now, like literally at the time you're watching this video, I am probably live or about to go live with a Elspeth von Draken campaign that somebody literally bribed to make happen. Everyone knows how much I hate Elspeth von Draken, even though it's more of a meme. I don't like hate her, but I do hate her. I don't know if that makes sense. I love everything in Warhammer, but I love Elspeth the least. And so I'm playing a modded campaign that features her as a legendary lord that has actually been a lot of fun. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will be uploading that entire stream up here to YouTube, as well as some other campaigns we've been playing. Those are all coming very soon. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. I don't know when, but presumably media stuff will start hopefully in the near future for Total War Warhammer 3. And if I am allowed to be a part of that, you can bet your butts that I'm going to be doing as much as I can. So when that happens, I'll see y'all then. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.